Welcome to Plot Explained, and here we are, from the dark halls of the Abbey in The Nun, to the cursed doll Annabelle, to the Enfield haunting. We've traveled through every shadow of the Conjuring Universe together. And now, that journey finally brings us here, to the Conjuring. The Devil Made Me Do It. This is where everything changes. For the first time, Ed and Lorraine Warren step out of haunted houses and into a courtroom, facing the infamous trial where "The Devil Made Me Do It" was used as a legal defense in America. Now, before we dive in, let me address the future of this series. As you know, The Conjuring, The Last Rites is only days away from release, and I'll be attending an early screening. But here's the catch: the proper HD version won't be available online for a while. I could cover it right away using a cam print, but honestly, I'd prefer to wait for the HD release. Still, I'll leave that choice to you guys. I'll post a poll on the channel, and if enough of you want a breakdown immediately, I'll make it happen. Otherwise, we'll wait for the HD version and experience it properly. But right now, let's close this chapter the way we've closed every one before, with a complete scene-by-scene breakdown. And if you've been enjoying this entire journey, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this video reach more people, and in turn helps the channel keep growing. The movie opens in 1981, on the night of David Glatzel's exorcism. An 8-year-old boy, who's tormented by a demonic possession. Inside the living room, as the family prays, Ed calls for a brief pause. Later, Lorraine quietly asks him if he's alright, and though he nods, he admits he's never seen anything like this before. Ed suggests that David should get some rest, and Arne, who's dating Debbie, David's elder sister, gently takes the boy upstairs. David's father Carl worries about his little boy, but Ed reassures him that the exorcism has been approved, and Father Gordon will be arriving any moment. Upstairs, Arne tucks David into bed, calling him a brave boy. And David asks Arne when does he plans to propose to his sister. Arne laughs it off, and headlights flash outside. He looks through the window, and it's Father Gordon. He steps out of the cab into the quiet night and walks solemnly toward the house. Later, David jolts awake in his room. As loud bangs rattle his bedroom door, he quickly flees to the bathroom and hides inside the bathtub, behind the curtains. And everything falls silent. Then, a clawed, demonic hand crawls across the railing and vanishes. The taps creak open on their own, releasing a torrent of blood that drenches David from head to toe, as the boy screams in sheer terror. Everyone burst into the bathroom, and they find David crouched in the corner. But the moment Carl approaches to comfort him, the boy lunges forward and stabs him in the knee. Ed reacts instantly, grabbing hold of David and shouting to Father Gordon, telling him that the exorcism has to happen right here, right now. They hurry downstairs. Ed carries the thrashing boy as David growls and claws along the walls, leaving deep gouges in the plaster. Lorraine sweeps everything off the dining table, and David is slammed down onto it, as Arne, Debbie, Lorraine, and Ed hold him down against his violent spasms. The entire house begins to tremble under the force of his screams. Father Gordon begins the rite while Drew records everything. Lorraine clasps David's hands tightly, praying as foam drips from his mouth. Suddenly, David clutches her arm, and Lorraine is pulled into a vision. She sees someone performing black magic rituals. The image is sharp and sinister, but she snaps back to reality. When Ed asks what's wrong, she brushes it off. Gordon sprinkles holy water over David, and steam rises from his skin as he convulses and shrieks in agony. His body twists unnaturally, sizzling as if burning from the inside. For a moment, he collapses back against the table and everything falls still. But then, the crockery cupboard explodes open. Plates and cutlery fly across the room as violent winds tear through the house. The family ducks for cover, but one plate smashes directly into Father Gordon's head, knocking him down. Ed scrambles to help as Lorraine yells at him to hurry. Gordon shoves the exorcism book into Ed's hands. And now, it's on Ed to continue the rite. The storm intensifies. David's body bends backwards, twisting grotesquely. He stretches his neck unnaturally, glaring at Debbie. She screams as David lets out a chilling, mocking laugh. Then he twists back into shape, laughing maniacally. Arne shouts at the demon to leave the boy alone. And Ed yells at him not to address it. But it's too late. The demon hurls Debbie across the room, then throws Arne as well. He then rises from the table, his body moving like a broken puppet, and lunges at Ed. He pins him to the ground and punches him on his chest. With a cruel sneer, the demon promises to stop his breath. Ed gasps for air as his heart falters under the attack. Lorraine rushes to help, but once again, she's yanked into a vision. That same figure performing black magic rituals, controlling the evil from afar. Arne scrambles up and pulls David into his arms, shaking him and pleading with him to fight from within. He screams at the demon, begging it to leave David alone and take him instead. Suddenly, David goes completely silent, and then falls unconscious, while Arne freezes in place. His eyes flicker, showing the demon has found its new host. Ed, still clutching his chest and struggling to breathe, watches in horror, realizing what's just happened. Arne returns back to normal for now, and stumbles back against the wall, as the chaos inside the house finally falls silent. Debbie rushes to her little brother's side, as David's parents, Carl and Judy, rush downstairs, relieved to see David alive. Meanwhile, Lorraine kneels beside Ed, checking his pulse. He's still alive, but barely. She urges Debbie to call 911 immediately. For David, the possession is finally over. But for Arne, the nightmare has only just begun. At the hospital, Lorraine, Judy, and Father Gordon anxiously wait as a doctor approaches them. He explains that Ed is stable for now, but he's suffered a major heart attack. They'll need to insert a stent to restore proper blood flow. Until then, it's uncertain how things will progress. Meanwhile, Arne sleeps restlessly. He hears voices echoing in his head, Ed warning him not to speak to the demon, and his own desperate words offering himself in David's place. He jolts awake, just as Debbie enters the room. Arne tells Debbie that now that everything is over, they should move out of this house and start fresh somewhere new. But Debbie gently reminds him they don't have the money to move. She has just started this job at a dog kennel, and for now, she doesn't want to leave her family behind either. Later, Debbie and Arne are at her parents' house. Debbie tells her mother that Arne has been asking if they can leave Brookfield. She then calls over to Arne, who is nearby playing with David, and asks if he can bring in the food from the kitchen. Arne agrees and heads inside. While collecting the food, he pauses to grab a quick snack. When suddenly, he hears a rustling sound. A cereal box shakes on its own before tumbling to the floor across the room. Arne slowly approaches, but it turns out to be just a mouse. He follows it as it scurries into a burned hole in the wall. He leans in to peek inside, but sees nothing. When he turns back around, a woman suddenly appears right behind him, clutching his neck. Arne struggles in fear, but in a blink, he sees that there's no one there. Back at the hospital later that night, Father Gordon arrives and finds Lorraine asleep beside Ed's bed. She wakes as he approaches, and he gently suggests she should go home and get some rest. But Lorraine recalls how she met Ed 30 years ago, back when he worked at a theater she once visited. That's where they first talked, fell in love, and began their life together. Looking at Gordon, she softly says she can't leave, because her home has always been with Ed. The next day, Arne is at work, perched high in a tree, struggling to get a chainsaw started. From the house behind him, the same woman watches him from a nearby window. Arne senses her presence and slowly turns, only to see the window empty. Suddenly, the chainsaw roars to life on its own before slipping from his hands and crashing below. Later, Arne returns home early. Debbie notices his pale, sweaty face and asks why he's back so soon. He mutters that he just isn't feeling well. Their landlord, Bruno, renamed from Alan Bono in real life for ethical and legal reasons, shows up and asks Arne to fix the music player, insisting they'll have some drinks and a little party. Arne tries to decline, but Bruno pushes him inside anyway. Back at the hospital, Ed finally wakes. Lorraine and Judy rush to his side and Ed informs Lorraine that the danger isn't over. She reassures him that David is safe now, but Ed tells her that David is safe only because Arne offered himself in his place. Arne is the one possessed now. Meanwhile, Bruno is partying with Debbie and Arne, but Arne looks worse by the minute, sweating, stumbling, barely able to stand. Lorraine tries calling the Glatzel home, but no one answers. Back at the house, Debbie and Bruno playfully pull Arne to dance, but he's barely conscious. Lorraine has no choice but to call the police station. She warns them that something terrible is about to happen at the Brookfield kennel. Arne retreats to the kitchen, splashing water on his face, trying to steady himself. Suddenly, Debbie's scream echoes from the other room. He runs back to see Bruno gripping her shoulders, twitching violently. He screams and his face is distorted inhumanly. Arne lunges to grab Debbie, but then we realize that it was only Arne's hallucination. And he's still hallucinating, backing away, shielding Debbie. He stumbles back as the hallway warps into darkness, glowing red, and then that same demonic figure charges at him on all fours. In a panic, Arne grabs a knife. And we cut to outside the house, and only hear Debbie's screams and the sound of stabbing. Later in the day, on a quiet road, a police car drives, and we see a man walking. As the car passes him, the camera shows us it's Arne. His face is blank. His eyes are hollow, clearly showing that he's possessed right now. The officer slows down, turns the car around, and steps out, calling to Arne calmly, asking if he's alright. Arne turns, and in that moment, his eyes shift back to normal. He looks confused, as if he has no idea where he is. When he faces the officer, the man's expression changes to shock. Arne's shirt and hands are completely covered in blood. Looking down at himself, Arne quietly says, "I think I hurt somebody." At night, a news broadcast plays. The reporter explains how the town was shaken after Arne stabbed Bruno 22 times. The first murder in Brookfield's 193-year history. The next day, Arne is sitting in a prison. Ed, who is in a wheelchair now, Lorraine, and Debbie are there with him. Arne recites a verse from the Bible while Lorraine rests her hand on his shoulder. On the table in front of them sits a crucifix and a bottle of holy water. As Arne finishes the verse, Ed gives Lorraine a look, but she shakes her head. She explains that she doesn't sense anything. The religious objects here should have provoked any spirit still inside him, but nothing happened. A nearby priest asks if that means Arne isn't possessed. Ed clarifies that since Arne just read from the Bible, so that means he isn't possessed now. But that doesn't mean he wasn't before. Arne admits that he invited the demon in himself. Debbie quickly tells him it isn't his fault, that what happened that day wasn't really him. Lorraine reassures them that she and Ed will help however they can. But Debbie asks them what can they even do if Arne isn't possessed anymore. Ed says they need to speak with Arne's lawyer. Later, Ed and Lorraine sit with Arne's lawyer in her office. She explains to them that Arne's fingerprints were all over the knife. Ed and Lorraine acknowledge that, but they ask her to argue in court that Arne was under demonic influence when he committed the murder. The lawyer says this has never been done before, but Ed corrects her. It has, in England, twice. She rephrases herself. It has never been done, successfully. Lorraine assures her that they'll help, that they'll provide evidence. But the lawyer insists that the court doesn't work like the church. The methods of evidence are different. Ed tells her that the court already believes in the existence of God. It's time they also believe in the existence of the devil. The lawyer asks how they plan to convince a jury if they can't even convince her. And Ed simply invites her to dinner at their home. He tells her they'll introduce her to Annabelle, and if she still doesn't believe after that, they'll back away. The next day in court, the lawyer sits nervously as the trial begins. She announces that her client pleads not guilty on the grounds of demonic possession. After hearing this, the judge looks around in confusion. No one was expecting this defense plea. After the hearing, the lawyer tells Ed and Lorraine that the jury is leaning toward the death penalty. If they want to save Arne, they'll have to act fast and prove their claim. She wishes them luck before walking away. Ed and Lorraine stay behind. Ed asks what they should do now, and Lorraine says that the demons don't disappear like that completely. There's clearly something else going on here. Ed asks her where should they start. And Lorraine looks at him and says, from the beginning. Later at their home, Ed and Lorraine review a recording from the time David was still possessed. The family explains that his strange behavior began the day they moved into their new house. We cut back 5 months earlier. Everyone is moving things inside when young David runs through the front door. He explores room to room until he finds one with a waterbed. He climbs on top of it, walking and laughing before lying down. For a moment he rests peacefully, until a face suddenly presses against the sheet beneath him. Startled, David slowly moves to climb off, until a pale hand pushes through the mattress, sliding across his. When David stops to look, the hand rips through the sheet and grabs him, trying to pull him down. He screams and struggles until he manages to break free. He gasps for air as everyone rushes in. Judy hugs him tightly while David says that was the first time he saw that thing. But no one believed him back then. In the corner, we see Lorraine quietly watching, as the scene shifts back to the present. Ed, now walking with a cane, is with Lorraine and Debbie in the same room. Debbie questions how David could have invited a demon in. Ed asks about the waterbed. Debbie points to the spot right behind them. explaining the wooden floor underneath was damaged when the bed ruptured. Ed pulls back the rug and sees the rotted floor. He looks at Lorraine, and then tells Debbie this isn't water damage. They head outside as Debbie opens the cellar door. She explains the room floor is 15 feet in and to the right. Ed offers to go in, but Lorraine insists she'll do it. She crawls inside the narrow crawlspace. A mouse scurries by, making her scream. Ed calls from outside, but she reassures him that it was just a mouse. Eventually, she spots a plastic sheet. When she peeks through, she sees dozens of mice scurrying around something in the center. Crawling closer, she uses a metal rod to shift the cloth aside, and beneath it is a witch's totem. Lorraine stares at it, noticing the rotten floorboards above. Then she quickly snaps photos of it with the camera. Later, they regroup inside the house. Lorraine explains the totem is used by Satanists in rituals. Ed clarifies that David hadn't invited the demon. Lorraine says that he was cursed. She continues, saying the curse was later passed from David to Arne. Ed explains that in these rituals, the demons are summoned, they claim a life, and then they depart. Lorraine adds that this is why Arne was able to read from the Bible afterwards. Ed instructs Drew and Debbie to mail the photos to every police station to see if anyone recognizes the symbol. Father Gordon steps forward, looking at the photo carefully. He remembers a retired priest, Father Kastner, who once exposed the disciples of the Ram cult a decade earlier. If anyone can identify the totem, it's him. Ed and Lorraine arrive at the home of Father Kastner. They introduce themselves to him, and he invites them into his house. They sit with him and show him the photo of the totem. The moment Kastner sees it, he tells them to forget they ever found it. Ed presses him, asking if he's seen it before. Kastner admits it's not the exact same, but he's seen similar things in the past. Lorraine asks why anyone would curse a child, and Kastner explains that with Satanists, there's no why. Their goal is chaos, doing things so twisted no one else would even imagine them. Lorraine points out that someone must have put the totem under the house. She asks who that could be. Instead of answering, Kastner tells them to follow him. He leads them to the basement. At the door, Lorraine stops on the stairs. She tells Ed she doesn't want to go down there. Ed asks what's inside, and Kastner says simply, "The things you came here for." They step inside, and the sight is disturbing. The room is filled with cursed objects, demonic relics, and occult items, much like Ed and Lorraine's own artifact room. Kastner explains that he collected them years ago while investigating the disciples of the Ram, and in here, they may or may not find the answers they came here for. As Lorraine looks around, she tells him he should have destroyed everything in here. But Kastner gives the same reason Ed does. These things are safer locked away than out in the world. Ed picks up a book, but Lorraine asks him not to touch anything. Kastner tells them that Satanists don't just worship evil, they live to commit acts too dark to even speak of. He recalls the trial of the disciples of the Ram. The prosecutor's wife was pregnant when the cult was convicted. The baby was born prematurely, with its heart outside its body. Not long after, the wife killed herself by throwing her body under a train. Kastner turns to Ed and Lorraine and warns them, a master Satanist is not someone to take lightly. If they keep pursuing this, saving Arne could end up costing them everything. We cut to a sigil of Baphomet glowing in candlelight, as the mysterious woman who's been stalking Arne continues her ritual. In front of her lies Arne's photograph, and she curses him once again. That night in prison, Arne is mopping the floor when he accidentally knocks over the bucket. As he crouches to retrieve it, the bucket is yanked into the shadows. Arne pulls back, and when he stands up, the lights in his cell flicker and suddenly the entire room goes dark. Behind him, an inmate, who was sleeping before, is now sitting on his bed, and begins singing softly to Arne. As Arne backs away in fear, the same grotesque figure resembling Bruno grabs his face from behind, and screams in his ear. Arne thrashes in terror as guards rush inside to restrain him. He keeps screaming that someone was there. Meanwhile, we see the woman calmly walking away from her ritual. The next day, Ed examines photographs of the totem when Lorraine shows him a flower vase sent by the Perron family. Their moment is interrupted by a call from Drew. He tells Ed he's found someone who has seen a totem like this before, a homicide detective in Danvers. Ed and Lorraine head to the station, where they meet Sergeant Clay. He shows them a photo of two best friends, Katie and Jessica, who disappeared 4 months ago. Katie's body was found stabbed 22 times, but Jessica is still missing. He then reveals a photo of the exact same witch's totem. They found it in Jessica's house. When he asks for their expert opinion, Ed explains that if the same totem was involved, it's possible Jessica was possessed. Clay insists he deals in evidence, not superstition, and has been trying to trace the killings to a satanic cult. Lorraine offers a deal. If they help him find Jessica, he gives them full access to the case file. Clay tests Lorraine's abilities by laying 3 knives in front of her from the evidence locker, asking her to identify the one Jessica used. Ed protests, but Lorraine calmly picks the correct knife without hesitation. Clay is shaken and impressed. Clay drives Ed and Lorraine into the forest where Katie's body was found. As they approach the site, Lorraine suddenly corrects him. He missed the turn where they found Katie's body. Clay is shocked. She knew the exact spot, while Ed just smirks with pride in the backseat. In the woods, Lorraine stops and lowers herself to the ground. The environment shifts around her as she enters a vision. She sees Katie and Jessica laughing, running through the forest at night. Following them, she sees Jessica gift Katie a bracelet. But then Jessica turns, her face distorted with possession, and begins stabbing her friend relentlessly. Lorraine mimics the motions of the stabbing in real time. Ed tries to snap her out of it, but she's still caught in the vision and takes off running through the woods. Ed struggles to keep up, as his heart condition is slowing him down, but he pushes forward. Lorraine bursts out of the trees and finds herself at the cliff's edge overlooking a raging river just as she falls out of the vision. Ed calls out to her to carefully step back, but before she can, a demonic hand bursts from the edge and pulls her down. Ed lunges forward, grabbing her just in time. He pulls her up to safety as Clay arrives. Lorraine tells Ed quietly that Jessica is down there. At night, the forest is lit up with searchlights. A paramedic gives Ed some medicine to help stabilize his blood flow when Sergeant Clay walks over and asks for a private word. He tells Ed and Lorraine that a body has been found, but they can't confirm yet if it's Jessica. Until then, they don't want the word spreading. He thanks them for their help and promises to send the case file to their motel and walks off. Later that night, at the motel, Ed and Lorraine receive a phone call from Debbie. She asks them that they said the demon was gone, but it's still with Arne. And worse, it's now telling him to take his own life. Ed tells her to stay calm and immediately instructs her to get the prison chaplain to put Arne under 24-hour suicide watch. But before she can respond, a sharp, piercing screech cuts through the phone line, and the call disconnects. Inside the prison, Arne sits quietly in his cell. When the priest approaches, handing him a bottle of holy water, reassuring him to stay strong and reminding him that God is with him. Back at the motel, Ed and Lorraine try to piece things together. Lorraine explains that this demon isn't here of its own will, it was summoned. That makes it a curse, and curses can be broken. Ed asks her how. Lorraine recalls when they were exorcising David. She touched his hand, and in that moment, she saw someone else. She believes she was linked to the person responsible for all this. And if the body the police found really is Jessica, then that open connection must still exist. In his prison cell, Arne sits on the floor, looking around in terror. A shadow creeps toward him, the same demonic shape he's been seeing. But when it steps into the light, it's only a guard making his rounds. Arne quickly gets up, takes the holy water, and pours it in a circle around himself. He sits inside, praying desperately for protection. Meanwhile, Ed and Lorraine arrive outside a funeral home late at night. It's locked, but Ed breaks the glass with his cane, telling Lorraine they'll leave a note. Together, they step inside and walk through the dark, empty halls until they reach the room where the bodies are kept. Inside, they find one laid out behind a plastic curtain. They step in carefully, and Lorraine takes the hand of the corpse and closes her eyes. At first, she feels nothing. But then, she whispers that there is a connection. With her eyes still shut, she slowly turns, then opens them again, and suddenly, she's no longer in the funeral home. She steps out of the plastic curtain and finds herself inside an ancient, dimly lit structure. She walks forward, climbing a staircase as the faint rumble of a train echoes around her. Ed's voice comes faintly, asking where she is. Lorraine replies that it's an old building, near a train. Ahead of her is an altar surrounded by 12 black candles, and at its center is the woman. Ed asks who the woman is, but Lorraine says she can't see her face, because in this vision, she's inside her, seeing the ritual as it happens. The woman is reaching out to Arne, trying to complete the curse. In the prison, Arne begins to convulse, as the possession takes hold of him again. He grips the bottle of holy water and crushes it in his hand. then takes a shard of glass into his hand, and with the woman's gestures echoing in his mind, he raises it toward his wrist. Back inside the vision, Lorraine reacts in horror, shouting, "To stop this, by the blood of Calvary." A violent wind erupts, breaking the ritual's hold. The woman's face is finally revealed just as her connection with Arne shatters. In his cell, Arne collapses unconscious. A guard looks at him and sees his wrist cut and bleeding. Back in the vision, Lorraine confronts the woman. The woman demands to know how she got there. Lorraine answers firmly that God showed her the way. The woman then coldly replies that Lorraine's God has damned her. Back in reality, the lights in the room suddenly go out. Ed carefully steps out from behind the curtain and flips the switch to turn them back on. But when the room lights up, on the table beside him, where another body was lying before, it's gone. Ed slowly turns, and in the shadows, he sees that the missing body standing motionless in the dark. Ed whispers for Lorraine, urging her to break the connection, but she doesn't respond. The corpse begins to twitch, its head jerking unnaturally before turning toward Ed. Then, without warning, it rushes straight toward Lorraine. Ed lunges across the room, grabs Lorraine, and yanks her away from Jessica's hand. The moment their touch breaks, the body collapses mid-run and crashes to the floor, lifeless once again. Ed and Lorraine stare in horror at what just happened. Lorraine catches her breath, then looks at Ed and warns him. She knows who we are. They return home, where Drew and Debbie are already waiting. Ed tells them they've received the case file. Drew adds that he has something else to show, pulling out an old book. Ed flips through it, reading aloud. The curse works by a murder, followed by a suicide. Lorraine asks how they can stop it, but Ed admits the next passage is written in a language he can't understand. Debbie asks if the curse is broken since they stopped Arne from killing himself. But they tell her it doesn't work like that, she'll try again, because her own soul depends on it. Ed turns to Lorraine, asking if she remembers the altar. Lorraine recalls it, cold, damp, water dripping from the ceiling, and the sound of a train nearby. But she doesn't know exactly where it was. Ed reasons that since the woman targeted both Arne and Jessica, there must be a connection in the case file. He gets up to check it, but suddenly his body stiffens. And he collapses unconscious. Moments later, Ed wakes up in his bedroom. He stumbles to his feet and calls out for Lorraine. He notices the front door wide open. Cautiously, he walks over, realizing it hasn't just been left ajar, it's been broken open. At the doorstep, he spots Lorraine's rosary lying on the floor. Ed bends to pick it up, but a chill runs through him. He turns and sees her, the mysterious woman, standing silently behind him. Furious, Ed demands to know where Lorraine is and warns her not to have harmed her. The woman calmly tells him to relax. She doesn't want them to stop now, they're so close. Then, in an instant, she vanishes into black smoke. The door creaks shut behind him, and the corpse from the funeral home is standing there again. It twitches to life and lunges at him. Ed dodges in time, then grabs the rosary, holding it up as he begins to pray. The body screeches in pain, retreating under the holy words. Ed presses forward and gestures to raise a knife. But suddenly, Drew grabs him from behind, snapping him out of it. Ed realizes that he was about to stab Lorraine. Lorraine tells Ed the woman was here. Ed frantically rushes through the house searching for something. Drew and Debbie ask what he's looking for, but Ed doesn't answer. In the study room, he tears through shelves and drawers. Then Lorraine notices something. Burned flowers sitting in a vase. She asks Drew when they got there. He says they were delivered yesterday, but they weren't burned. Ed slowly lifts the vase, dumps the flowers, and peers inside. His face goes pale. The vase slips from his hand and shatters on the floor. Inside was the witch's totem. The next day, Ed and Lorraine gather in the living room with Drew and Debbie. They're trying to make sense of everything. Lorraine says the next step is finding out who this mysterious woman really is. She decides she'll take the ancient book to Father Kastner. Maybe he can read the part Ed couldn't, and they can figure out the location of the altar. She then tells Debbie to go stay with Arne. He'll need her by his side tonight. And she asks her to take the priest along too. Ed turns to Drew, saying they'll go through the case files again and try to figure out the connection. We then cut to the prison, where Arne lies sedated, handcuffed to his bed. Debbie is also there beside him as the priest quietly begins to pray. Meanwhile, Lorraine is driving through the night, heading toward Kastner's house. Back at home, Ed and Drew spread all the case files across the table, searching for patterns. The Glatzels live just 15 minutes away in the same town, but Jessica committed her murder in Denver. The huge distance doesn't make sense. Ed asks Drew where Jessica first found the totem. Drew digs through the files, remembering it was when Jessica came home from college. She had found the totem inside her things. Ed asks which college she attended, and Drew tells him, Fairfield. That's much closer, still in their area, which means the woman must be operating nearby, but it's still a lot of ground to cover. Then Ed recalls something Lorraine said about hearing a railway. They narrow it down even more. Out of the 3 lines, only one fits. It crosses a river at midnight. And the moment Ed hears river, something clicks in his mind. At that same time, Lorraine finally arrives at Kastner's home. She asks if he can help her decipher the strange text in the book. He tells her to come inside, but oddly, once she steps in, Kastner quietly locks the door behind her. Back at the Warren home, Ed quickly asks Drew for the car keys and tells him to call the police. He rushes out in a panic. As Drew makes the call, we are shown something on the table, Ed's pills. He's forgotten them. At Kastner's house, Lorraine sits down with him as Kastner explains that the curse they're dealing with requires 3 lives: a child, a lover, and a man of God. Lorraine's face drops in worry. She tells him about the totem they found in Ed's office, which means Ed himself has now been cursed. Kastner then asks Lorraine to follow him. He wants to show her something. Meanwhile, Ed is racing down the dark road, heading towards Kastner's home. At Kastner's, Lorraine carefully looks down into the basement and calls out to him, but he doesn't answer. She hesitates, then steps down into the pitch-black occult room. Then Kastner turns the lights on. He shows her an album filled with photographs of his daughter, Isla. He explains that his wife died during childbirth, so he raised Isla alone in this house. They had a happy life together, while he continued his research on the occults. But instead of protecting his daughter from it, he accidentally sparked her fascination. Back at the prison, Arne slowly wakes. Debbie leans close, and he tells her, the woman is near. And the priest continues his prayers. Meanwhile, at Kastner's house, Lorraine finally realizes the horrifying truth. The woman haunting them is Isla, Kastner's own daughter. She demands to know why he kept this from them when they came before. Kastner admits that when Isla returned, he thought she'd come back to him as family. He never realized she came back for this. He explains about the tunnels beneath the land, the same tunnels Isla used to explore as a child. Her altar must be down there. Destroying it is the only way to break the curse. Upstairs, the door creaks open. Kastner and Lorraine freeze as they realize Isla's here. Kastner slides a shelf aside, revealing a hidden passage. He hands Lorraine a torch, urging her to go down and find the altar. As the shelf closes behind her, Isla stands in the doorway. Kastner returns to his chair, pulls a gun from the drawer. As Isla calmly walks around the room, Kastner begins to pray. I failed as a priest, as a father, but please God, don't let me fail. Suddenly, Isla appears behind him and slits his throat, and Kastner collapses lifeless. Underground, Lorraine stumbles, instantly feeling Kastner's death. But she presses on, moving deeper into the dark tunnels filled with occult objects. She finally reaches a chamber, Isla's ritual room. The altar is there. Lorraine tries to flip it, but it's too heavy. Visions overwhelm her, and she knows Isla is getting closer. Outside, Ed pulls up. He calls out for Lorraine, and faintly, she answers. Following her voice, he realizes it's coming from a drain vent. He yanks at the lock, but it won't budge. He quickly grabs a hammer and smashes it open. Down in the tunnels, Lorraine runs, only to stumble and see herself in front of her, repeating her every move. She turns to run the other way and sees herself close the door on her, and suddenly, Isla appears, slamming her to the ground and forcing a knife toward her face. She hisses at Lorraine, demanding she look at her. For a moment, Lorraine sees herself in Isla's eyes, then spots a rock nearby. She grabs it, strikes Isla, and escapes. Ed finally climbs into the tunnels, calling out for Lorraine, and a hallway lights up beside him, guiding him forward. From behind, Lorraine runs toward him, but as she comes close, her figure turns into Isla, and she blows a black curse into his eyes. As everything around him begins to darken, Isla returns to the altar, preparing for the ritual. Lorraine searches frantically for Ed in the shadows, when suddenly, he appears, but his eyes are hollow. He's swinging the hammer uncontrollably, clearly possessed. At the prison, Arne gasps and thrashes violently. Debbie begs the priest to act. The exorcism begins as Arne screams, his body twisting unnaturally. Back in the tunnels, Ed keeps swinging wildly, while Lorraine pleads for him to stop. At the same time in his cell, Arne writhes and screams as the windows and lights around him explode. Debbie desperately tries to hold Arne as his body twists and contorts in unnatural ways, bones cracking as he screams in agony. Down in the tunnels, Ed continues to swing the hammer violently, aiming for Lorraine, who pleads with him to stop, to remember who she is. But Ed doesn't listen. Suddenly, he falls into a brief vision. He hears Lorraine's voice whispering, urging him to remember their love. He sees flashes of their younger days, their first date, but the curse still claws at him, dragging him back into rage. At the prison, Arne thrashes so violently that he slips free from the handcuffs. His body contorts as he drops to the floor, crawling on all fours like something inhuman. He grabs a shard of broken glass as the priest continues the exorcism. The room shakes, wind howls, and Debbie fights to steady him. Arne stands up and rises in the air, and drives the shard in his neck, but Debbie grabs his hand and begs him to stop. In the tunnels, Lorraine backs against the altar, trapped as Ed approaches with the hammer. She begs him again. "This isn't you, our love is not our weakness, it's our strength." Her words break through, as Ed truly sees her, and his eyes slowly return to normal. With a final cry, he lifts the hammer and smashes it into the altar, shattering it to pieces. At that exact moment, Arne's photograph falls to the ground. The chaos in the prison stops. Arne drops from the air and collapses, his body returning to normal. Debbie rushes to him, holding him tight, sobbing in relief. Meanwhile in the tunnels, Ed helps Lorraine to her feet. But from the shadows, Isla emerges with knife in hand, blood running from her nose. Ed stands his ground, telling her, "Your curse is broken." Suddenly, Isla's arms twist and snap backward, forcing her to her knees. Ed continues, "You promised the demon a soul, and it won't return to hell without one." Isla is spun around, terrified, as another version of herself steps forward from the darkness. With a snarl, the demon grabs Isla's head and violently snaps her neck. Her body falls, twisted and lifeless, as Ed and Lorraine watch in grim silence. In the prison, Arne collapses into Debbie's arms. The two hold each other tightly, relieved that the nightmare is finally over. Down in the tunnels, Ed and Lorraine climb their way back to the surface. Ed realizes he's forgotten his pills at home, but Lorraine opens her locket and hands him the one she had kept safe inside. Ed smiles softly as the police arrive at the scene. The two embrace, grateful to still have each other. Later, back at their home, Ed carefully places Isla's ritual bowl inside the artifact room, the newest addition to their growing collection. We cut to the day of Arne's hearing. He's brought into the courtroom. Elsewhere, Sergeant Clay sits quietly at the grave of Katie and Jessica, paying his respects. In the courtroom, the judge listens as the evidence of Arne's possession is presented. Arne turns his head, locking eyes with Ed, Lorraine, and Debbie. Gratitude washes over him. He knows they saved his life. On-screen text then reveals Arne Johnson was convicted of manslaughter. He served 5 years in prison, and during that time, he and Debbie married. They remain married to this day. As of 2021, Debbie died from cancer later that year. In the final scene, Ed gently leads Lorraine outside into their garden, his hands covering her eyes. When he finally uncovers her eyes, Lorraine gasps. Standing before her is a beautiful white gazebo, the same kind they took shelter under during the rain on their very first date. The two share a tender moment, and the screen slowly fades to black, closing out the film. And that officially brings The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It to a close. If you've been following along since The Nun, thank you for sticking with this entire journey. It's been one hell of a ride, and I've loved breaking it down scene by scene with you. Now, like I mentioned at the start, The Last Rites is only days away, but the real question is, do we break it down right away using a cam print, or do we wait until the proper HD release? That choice is yours. I'll drop a poll on the channel, and whichever way you guys vote, I'll make it happen. In the meantime, let me know in the comments which movie you want me to cover next. As now, we'll be getting back on track with other breakdowns. I've got a few in mind, but I'll leave it up to you to decide in an upcoming poll. If you enjoyed the series, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next. Thanks again for being part of this journey. This was Plot Explained, and I'll see you in the next one.